Hey, hi, my name's Lindsay, and we're going to paint this Four Seasons tree today. I want to lead you through something that's a little more simple than some of the other stuff that I was doing. I was asked to do something for somebody who's maybe never picked up a paintbrush before. So what I want to do today is do a little bit of blending on canvas, and then we'll mix some colors and do some fun little squiggly things that I think will hopefully be a whole lot of fun for you. What I want to do before we get started is go through supplies. So today I've got my paper plate, or what we're going to call a palette from here on out. And I've got all three of our primary colors and then white and black. So I'm going to use everything that you see here today to make all these little colors. And then I'm always going to have a paper towel, or in my case, I've got kind of an old dirty rag that I'm going to use. So I'm going to keep this pretty handy for any time I pull my paintbrushes out of my water cup. So my water cup is an old mason jar that I like to use. You can tell it's my painter's cup. It helps to just use the same cup so it gets all kind of ratty, and I don't drink out of it because I can really tell it's not the right cup. Today we're going to use two brushes. So I have a very large brush and a very small brush. I'm going to be using the large brush for most of the time here, and then the small brush we'll use to get some of the tree parts started. And when I'm not using them, I'm going to throw them right back into that water cup. That's so that they don't dry out as we're working. I'm using acrylic paints today. So acrylic paint is technically a plastic, which means it's going to dry in about 5 to 10 minutes. So if it does get on your clothes, go ahead and wash it off before it dries, and it's no big deal. If it does dry there, it's going to be a permanent addition to your attire. So maybe wear an apron. And then the last thing that somebody has suggested is telling you where I would pause so that you can let your canvas dry. When I do these, I go through them pretty quickly, and that's for the sake of the video not being incredibly long. But I would hope that you would pause it as you feel like you need to. And when I do the background, going from the background to the tree, I would maybe pause. And then before I go into what I'm going to call these little leaves and stuff, I'm going to pause after the tree before I do those little dots. Part of that time is gonna be because we're gonna stop to kind of mix colors and stuff. So hopefully the tree will dry as we get there. That doesn't mean anything to you because we haven't gotten to that part yet. So let's go ahead and get started. What I want to talk about first is I'm using sort of an old canvas here. It's got a big rip in it. I don't know if you can see that or not, but this is what I'm gonna call my starter painting. When I'm doing these, when I want to work out composition and stuff, I'll always have sort of thumbnails and stuff. And I actually have, this was the one that I started with. So if you can see on there, I've got all 4 colors that I wanted to use. And then I sort of blocked it out, and I decided on colors that I kind of wanted to go with and not go with. And then I'll work it out a little bit bigger on something a little larger. And then I decide that's the one I want to do. So do what's called a thumbnail or sketch before you go into your big canvas, and then you'll feel a little more comfortable moving into it because you've already kind of gone through it once. All right, let's get started. I've got my plate here. I've got so much white on here because what I want to do is start by quickly covering the entire canvas with white. I don't want to go in any sort of patterned way, so I kind of like to start from the top and work my way down. But I'm going to do kind of zigzags and scrub back and forth. I've got what I'm calling a generous amount of white paint, and I'm not pushing down very hard because I really want this to be kind of layered on here. I'm moving quickly for the reason that I'm covering a whole white canvas more white, so that doesn't seem like it's super entertaining for you. But also, I want to make sure that the paint is still wet when I move into it. So I'm moving through here. I've got a light hand. Just finish this guy up here. And then we'll talk about colors. So what I've got up here, I have a very, very light blue color for my winter. I have a little darker of a blue color for my spring. And then as I go into summer, I did a little bit of a darker green in the leaves, and we'll talk about that later. But I want to do a purple, and that's going to be what we call blending on canvas. So we'll work it out here. And then we'll move over to the fall, which is orange color. When we go into that, like I said, I want this to be pretty wet. So let's go right into the ones that I know we don't need to mix, which are the super light blue and then the little bit darker blue. The cool thing is when we start, if one gets too dark, guess what? That one becomes your summer section. or quadrant. So if we look at this in 4 sections here, I want to sort of plan out this square is going to be winter. This one here is going to be summer. This one here, well, I should start over. We've got winter here, spring right here, summer right here, and then fall over here. So the winter one, I wanted it to be super duper light because it's kind of, you know, snowy and bright. But I also want to be able to see when I put those little white dots on there, or snowflakes or leaves, whatever we want to call it. I want to be able to see that. So what I'm going to do is, with my big brush, it's dirty. We're going to do what's called the dirty dip. I'm going to dip just the very, very tip of my brush in here. And then I want to kind of wipe off those bristles because I don't want too much. I can always add a little bit more later. Once it's there, it's kind of there forever. So I'm going to start in the corner, give it a nice light wipe. And I'm just going to kind of drag this through. I'm doing I'm kind of Xing and T's and moving back and forth. What I'm shooting for here is something super light. And then in the corner, or in the middle here, I guess I should say, I want it to be more white than anything. Because if these sort of go over, it might make a little bit of a brown. If these ones go over, it won't be that big of a deal. And then if these ones go over, it won't either. But I want to make sure that certain colors don't hit each other. So I want it to kind of fade out. I've not reloaded my brush. I'm just going to work back and forth. And I'm going to eyeball the white and blue combination here. I got a little streak on there that's super duper blue. Exactly where I just told you I don't want. So I'm going to wipe off my brush. Get a little bit of fresh white. And with a really light hand, I'm just going to go over this a couple of times. It's okay that it's not bright white right there. I just don't want it to be as dark as that is up there. And I'd call that my winter phase. So it's got lots of little brush strokes. I don't want it to blend in all the way because I really like that it's got all these little bits of darker and lighter blues that are running through there. And then the other thing that I want to do is not work into it too much because then it's just going to become a really big light blue color, and that's pretty, but it's not what I'm going for. So the next one I'm going to do is the same technique, the same color, but I want to use a little more blue. So where I was wiping it off before, I'm just not going to try that hard. I'm going to start in the corner and bring it down. I'm going to kind of scan back and forth because I want to make sure that there's a visible difference. So I went back into my blue and I'm going to bring this down. There we go. So it's a little darker up here, but not so much down here. And I want it to be just a little more consistent throughout here. Just for the sake of it looking like two different seasons, skies. All right. It's getting a little dry down here. So I just dabbed in my water, and then always dab your napkin. I'm going to run this just damp brush through this one time. There we go. All right, so now I'm starting to overmix, or what I call noodle. I'm going to leave these. I can tell that this one's a little lighter than this side, so I'm going to call it good. I'm just going to be happy with it the way that it is. I want to do what I call the artist lean. It's where I'm going to lean back, take a good look at the whole thing. I think I eyeballed a little bit high, so I'm just going to take 2 seconds here and bring this down. I didn't get any more paint on my brush because I don't want to go crazy with it. I just used what's on there and just brought it down a little bit there. So next we're going to talk about the summer version. So summer is going to be the lower left corner, the lower right corner. I'm dyslexic. So the lower right corner, but if I flip my canvas over so that I don't have to mess with the easel or the bottom of your table, I'm going to flip it over, and I'll flip this one over so we don't get confused, because I'll do it. Now it becomes the top left corner. So I'm going to work in this corner here, and I want to make a purple, but I'm not going to mix. I'm going to do a fun thing called blending on canvas. What I'm going to start with is just a little bit of red, and I'm going to bring it down. And then before that dries, and very quickly, I'm gonna get some little tiny bit of blue and sort of mix into that. And what'll happen is we've got little bits of red and little parts that are more blue, because purple is a really fun color that you can kind of play with that way. So going into it, I am gonna clean my brush out just a little bit here. If there's still blue on it, it's not a big deal because we're already gonna make purple. So I've got a little tiny bit of red. I'm gonna wipe it off. It's a lot of red, so I'm gonna wipe it a little more. Maybe dab on my napkin there. Okay. And I'm gonna start right up in this corner. And I've got a very red sky. If you like it, leave it. I just wanna have a little more kind of, I don't know, mixture of colors. So I've got a dirty brush. I'm gonna wipe it off on my paper towel or napkin here. And I'm gonna do a very little bit of blue, kind of dab it off. And start in the same section that I started and work on through here. Starting to get a little dry. And also this color gets kind of dark if you keep going back into your blue and red. So if it gets really dark, you can use a little bit of white. But if it gets too dark, I would kind of go with it and make it a night sky. I'm gonna grab just a little bit of white. I kind of rubbed my napkin off so I don't have too much of this purpley color. And I'm gonna just blend this edge here because my paint got a little bit dry. There we go. All right. So when I'm blending the paint on, I'm not gonna push down very hard, especially when I'm setting down that first layer of red before I go into the blue. Because if it mixes into the white too much, it's gonna become like a pink and I won't have these darker shades so much. That looks weird. I'm gonna do that. And then I'm starting to noodle, so I'm gonna stop. So now I've got my 3 seasons. Now this one's winter, this one's spring, we've got summer, and we need fall. So I did my fall corner in an orange color because I feel like it plays with these colors really well. But if you wanted to do a yellow and then do orange dots or leaves, go ahead and do that. It's your painting, do it how you want it. I want to make sure my brush is really clean because yellow is sort of a temperamental color. So I'm really smashing my big brush down to the bottom here. And then when I pull it out, I'm going to wipe it on both of those big sides. And to make sure I don't have too much water here, I'm going to hold my paintbrush and squeeze right up by the metal because there's a lot of water that hides up in there. All right. For the fall, I'm going to do orange in the same sort of way that I did the purpley color. I'm going to start with yellow and then do just a little bit of red. The yellow is really, really light and the red will take over really quickly. So I'm going to do a little more yellow than red. I'm going to start it the way that I have before. And if I run the yellow into the purple too much, it's going to make a wonky color. So I'm just going to go right up to it and not really far into it. If I go too far down into here where the blue and the green are going to mix, it's going to get a green color, which isn't wrong. It's just going to look a little bit weird. So I've got that down. I'm going to rub off on my paper towel. I'm going to get just a tiny little bit here. So I'm dirty dipping. And then I'm going to dip just the tip of my brush in and I'm wiping it off. And I'm going to start in that same kind of way. All right, that weird little bit that was ripped is kind of scary. Sketchy there. There we go. All I'm trying to do is make sure there's not a ton of white between these two sections. If a tiny little bit gets brown, that's okay. If a bunch of it does, that's where your eye is gonna go this whole time. All right, so this is super duper dry. I'm gonna grab a little bit of water, tap on my paper towel, and I'm gonna go over it once. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is grab a little bit of white, and I'm gonna take one more trip through this section with a little bit of white, just to make it kind of blend a little bit more up here. I've got some white. I'm gonna start right down where it's a little bit dirty and go up to where it's super dirty. All right, so I could mess with this all day. I'm gonna bring a little more red down in the edge here. And then I'm gonna call it good because there is a real fun tree to put in here. All right. So we did this real fun thing called hurrying up to wait. Because if you wanted to know where a good time to pause is, this would be a good time to pause it. What we would do is sort of just let it dry a little bit. If you're somewhere you can set it outside, it's a really nice day for me today. You can set it outside and let it dry. That way, when you go in to do the tree, it won't get a bunch of white in there and turn into a gray tree. There's some sections in here that kind of did that, but I like it because I have this thing where if it's one solid color, it's kind of boring. So I like lots of different colors. So I'm just going to go into it. What I like to do is decide on which side I want to start up and then just work off of that. I might do the whole thing in this direction, but I really want to have the summer and spring up. I don't know, it just makes me feel better. So I'm going to lay that there. Of course I touched it. There we go. And what I want to do is each section here or quadrant gets 2 branches. Each branch has a little loop in it, but that's just sort of my thing, so you can do whatever you want. Oh, and then this one doesn't have a loop, and neither does that one. So, no, I lied. That one does. You get it. I'm going to switch to my small brush. And now I want to use black. Here's the cool thing about this. If you're really worried, you can just use a little bit of water and kind of trace through there. And then if you do something that you don't like, you can just sort of swipe over it, and then it won't matter because it's your painting. You'll know kind of where your little lines went. I am going to basically just copy that one, so I'm going to go into it. Here's the difference. I want to make sure that I've got a little bit of paint kind of lifted up here so it's not the whole pile. And I'm going to grab a little bit of water and mix it in. I really want to make sure it's not just water and paint swirled through, so I'm going to give it lots of little taps. And then I like when it kind of makes a foam. It just makes me feel good about myself. All right. So starting somewhere that doesn't matter so much. This middle section is going to get really thick. So if you're super worried about something, start right there in the middle. When I go into this, I'm just going to go in and kind of make my little swirls and try not to think about it too much. But I also want to make sure that I'm sort of taking up these top quadrants that kind of give me a little bit of a bow. And these middle sections, it's a little more open. So if you look at it top versus bottom, it's like we've got our canopy and then our, roots, those things. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to go a little bit straight. And right in this middle one, I've got a nice little swirl that does that. And then over here, I'm going to start out a little bit wider. So if you want like a measurement, it's about 3 fingers-ish wide. And I'm going to do a little swirl that way. And then these ones are going to come up a little bit higher and right in the middle here. And I think I'm changing it up. I'm going to go that way. And that guy's kind of close to the edge, so I'm going to go out that way. See, I said I was going to do that and I went different. I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to do a little bit more water in the blue so it gives me a little bit heavier of a line so you can see where I was. But your first lap through should really just be sketch lines so you don't have to see it as well. I want you to be able to see what I'm painting, so I'm just going to go over it one more time. There we go. All right, so now you can either flip it over or just go with it. So I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to come down. I like how there's a big swirly on one side. I know that they're flipped backwards, but that way it won't be the exact same. Coming around over here, I'm going to go out this way. Let's go like that. And then this guy is going to drift over to that side. I'm going to do one more, just like that. So after I've done an artist lean, I've got a lot more room up in here, but that's okay. And now I'm going to take another lap through. This lap is going to be a little more of a finesse lap. What I want to make sure is that these ends of our canopy or the branches or the roots, they're thin. So what I like to do is hold my brush a little more sideways and give it a nice swoop through. And then everything down here just needs to be thicker than that very tip top. So I'm going to go through and decide on where the little tip tops are. Give myself a start. And then what I'll do is start to look at where I need this to be heavier and where it needs to be thinner. So as I'm coming around here, I know I want this to be pretty thick, But as it goes into this other piece of the tree, I can make this side of the tree be thicker and go out that way, just to give it a little more personality. I'm using a little bit of water in my paint. It's just gonna help me push all this through. And there's a lot of sections here that I'm gonna push down pretty hard. And those are gonna be in this middle section here. But when I'm up in here, I've got a really light hand. And as I work into it, I'm gonna push down a little harder. So right here, I'm going really, really light. And then working into it, pushing down harder. So I'll do it a few more times because I've got a few more of these to do. Oh, there's a lot of paint on my brush right there, so a real light hand. A little heavier there. So really light to super heavy. And then as I move through these, the little bit of water is going to help me get a more defined outline, so this outer edge. If you're starting to get a nice, let's say, frayed, kind of like that, grab a little more paint, but also maybe mix a little bit more water into it. That's going to help get that nice sharp edge. So I want to work through and make all of my trees, branches, and roots kind of similar looking. So like I don't want to have this one super duper thick and then these ones super tiny. Want to make sure that they look like they're coming off of the same tree. And I know that this is super abstract, but there's rules. All right. I've got a few more here. And then while you're doing this, keep in mind, if there are little missed strokes, it's okay because anything you don't like, you can kind of cover with those little leaves, if that's what we're calling it. Let's see, I've got a few more here. And then after I do anything like a big step, I'm going to do the step back, that artist lean, and give it a nice gander. Almost through this tree here. So when I do the lean back, I can see that these ones are all really thin and these ones are a little bit thicker, so I might take one more lap through there and do all of those. I also can see that there's a big gap right there. So I was just painting way too close to it, and now I see what I've done. There we go. Okay, if you wanted to take this one step farther, you can take a little bit of white and sort of streak it through here so that you've got those nice sort of bark structures. And again, just adding that, it's not one solid color again. But if you do that, which isn't on here, think about which part of your canopy or your branches or your roots are. So decide on what's in front. And then just don't worry about the back end of it because that would be shaded anyway. Did it to that end, I'm going to do it to this end here. Here we go. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's there. You can. It just gives it a little more depth. Shows which side of the branch or the root is going to be in front of the other. And now we've got a nice little tree here. It's a little thin. There we go. And then I noodled a little bit and got rid of all that pretty sort of streaky that I did before. So that's where it goes wrong. You just keep working. All right. So this is another point that you could maybe pause and let this dry a little bit and come back to it. But while this does a little bit of drying, I want to make a green color. So we've got a very light yellow color and a very light green color. And I'm going to make both of those at the same time. I have an extra palette here, and I want to start with a very clean brush. So I cleaned it out really well. I'm drying it off. And I'm going to start with yellow. So I want to make this really bright yellow here. So I'm going to start with a small-ish scoop of yellow. And then I'm going to get a bigger scoop of white. And I'm going to mix that in. And I'm going to pull that together because what I want is to have a good pile of the paint. Because what we're going to do is use the back end of our bigger brush and get a big old glob of paint. So I want to make sure I've got enough to scoop from. I'm just going to grab right in the middle here. The trick for this lighter yellow color is to have more white than yellow. I'm going to go in one more time and then go for it. The color that you see when you're mixing is going to be a couple of shades darker, just a little bit darker than what you see while it's on here. I know it sounds opposite, but it's a thing. All right, so now that I've got that, I've got a really dirty brush. I'm going to go ahead and make another pile right here. So I've got more white than yellow, and I'm going to mix that in. So the difference with this one is I'm going to make it that really kind of light green. So I've got a dirty brush. I'm going to go in and get just a little bit of blue and go to my mixing pile here and start adding in a little bit of blue until I get the color that I like. Go a little bit more. And I might throw a little more yellow in here just to give it that extra bit of kind of grassy green color. I'm scraping and pulling this in so I've got a nice pile to pull from when I'm ready to do my little dippers. Let's see, I think it's pretty close. I could mix color all day and be super happy just finding the colors that I like, but I'm going to go with this one because it's pretty close. Okay, so I'm going to put this down, throwing a little brush in my cup, and I need my big brush, but I'm not going to use the brush end, so I really want to make sure it's dried out. So I'm grabbing that brush and giving it a little squeeze. And I'm going to use this back end. So when I do this, I want to make sure that I'm on the right side. I'm going to start with yellow. And yellow is going to be up in my fall section. So I've got my big brush. I'm going to take a big old glob of paint here. It's a big old glob. I don't know how well you can see it. There's a big glob. And what I want to do is go straight on. If you want to make a bigger circle, you can make sort of smaller circles to kind of go wider. Let's see, here's a good spot. But as I'm doing that, I'm not really pushing. The wood bit isn't actually touching the canvas. I've got that real big glob of paint, and I'm going to move around and reload my little wood bit every time and make these little dots. So I'm going to go through, and this is where you can kind of decide on if there's anything that you're not super fond of. You can go ahead and cover that up here. And then if you get a little bit of black into there, just let it dry a little bit and give it another coat. That's the cool thing about acrylic paint, is it's really easy to cover once you get it dried. So I've got some big dots. I want to do some little dots. And that's just going straight down and right back up. So what I'm trying to do is give myself different size dots. And if you don't know where to put the dots, I would say in clusters of 2 or 3 is kind of interesting. If you put too many in one spot, it's going to look a little weird. And then when I do that, I want to make sure that one dot is always a little bit bigger than the other. So as long as they're not all the same size, it gives it sort of a, I don't know, depth. See, do a few more and then I'm going to move on. So before I move on, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just wiping this off. And then the springtime one are lighter green color. So I'm going to get that lighter green color. And just like before, I'm going to move a little faster. I'm setting it down. I'm going to make some bigger little circles here and then some smaller ones. I'm going to do groups of 2 and 3. And then I think what I want to start remembering is this corner here. So I'm going to put a couple in that corner. Let's do a little bigger one. And that guy's going to be a little bigger. If you're like me, you're going to start talking to yourself as you're doing this. No big deal. All right, I'm going to do a couple more that are off in this little area here. Do my artist lean. What I might end up doing a little later, if I really think I need some more, I can add some more later. But for the sake of moving on, I'm going to go ahead and wipe this off. And the next color that I'm going to do is this darker green color. So what's cool about that is I can just mix a little more blue into my lighter green. And that big brush kind of takes a lot of paint. So I'm going to switch back to my small brush. I'm getting a little more blue. And I'll just keep adding a little bit of blue at a time. If you need to make more color, that's okay. Oh, that was a lot of blue. We're going with it. All right, we're using this, and I'm going to scrape it all together so I've got it all in sort of a pile here. All right, so we're moving back to the back end of my biggest brush. I'm grabbing a big old blob here. And then my summer is my top left corner here. Got some parts that didn't quite work out as well as I wanted it to. So we're going to cover those up. All right. I like to do a few dots that aren't touching the branch so that it makes it look definitely abstract. Let's see. I don't want to forget about the corner. That other one had 3, so I'm only going to do 2 dots on this one. Just try not to make a pattern. I find myself making patterns way too often, so I try really hard to kind of choose to not go that way. Here we go. I'm going to do one more little patch here. I didn't have enough paint there, so working with it anyway. There we go. All right, there's one more, and the winter one, I kind of envision it to be snow, but it can be whatever you want it to be, and that's white. I'm saving that one for last for a couple of reasons. I'm going to use the back end of my brush, and I want to make sure it's clean, so I'm just going to make sure it's nice and wiped down. I want to make sure that this has had a good amount of time to dry, so I did all the other ones, giving that as much time as I could. If you wanted to give it a little more time, you can absolutely stop again. Give it more time to dry, because when it goes into something that's not quite dry, it's going to give you sort of a dirty snowflake, which isn't really what I'm going for here. So if that happens, like I said, you can just wait for it to dry and go back over it. Make sure you clean the end of your brush off if it does get a little bit dirty. And then I'm going to move around here and make my little snowflakes. Oh, there we go. All right. Not forgetting about the corner. And I think that pretty much does it. So every time I'm done with these, you can sign them. If you are going to hang them on your wall without a frame, I would maybe paint the edge of your canvas there. And then when it sits on the wall, there's no like just kind of open canvas on those edges. I want to thank Odin from Odin Makes for lending me the GoPro so that I can do this. He made it all possible this week. And then if you enjoyed it, and I hope that you painted along with me, if not kind of stopping, pausing, and going back, kind of shooting through it in that 30 minutes, post it, show me what you've done. And then also, if you really liked it, this is kind of my job now. I'm going to put a link to my PayPal me to send any donations. If you make a $10 donation or more, I have a coloring book that I will send you a printable link to. So it's got about 12 pages, and it's real cute. Here, I've got it. No, I don't. Anyway, I do have it. It's right here. So I made this book. You can tell that I've been showing it around. It's got adorable little critters. And one of my favorites is going to be the one that looks like my dog, of course. So that's kind of Lucy. All right. So it was a whole lot of fun. I hope you try it. I hope you try the next one that I do. I have no idea what I'm going to do next, so please send me a comment or a message and let me know what you'd like to see me kind of work on. Here we go. This was our 4 Seasons tree, and I hope you had a good time.